This is a very important phone. The last Realme1 tried to seriously shake up the budget phone market, all but declaring war on brands like Xiaomi with their Redmi lineup. It had some great ideas, but at the same time enough shortcomings to prevent it taking off. Well, only a few months later, at a price tag of just under 10,000 rupees, $150 or £110, it's time for round 2. They call this the diamond cutting design. Without a prominent light source, it does look a little bit like just plain black, but when there is light, it scatters it in a really clever way to give the illusion of depth. I would say when there is light, it is every bit as beautiful as the Honor 10 or the P20 Pro. At the same time, it is similarly polarizing, so I'm sure there'll be plenty of people out there also who don't like it. What is unambiguous though is the strength that the glass adds to it. There is of course no flexing whatsoever, and it's scratch resistant, and these are two luxuries that at this kind of price you do not expect. Although there isn't any IP certification or wireless charging, just looking at the back alone, it could well be a device costing many times more. It's also a light phone, surprisingly so, given its colossal 4,230 mAh battery. Speaking of which, having a battery like that on a phone with as low power requirements as this one makes it a very durable unit for sure. It's not as good as I thought it would be based on the on-paper specs, but still, we're talking 18 hours of music or 12 to 15 hours of video. Really great battery life. It is still on micro USB, not the USB Type-C that we almost take for granted now on Android phones. And so the charging speed leaves something to be desired, but at least we still do have the headphone jack. Flicking round to the front, you've got a 6.2-inch display, quoting over 88% screen on the front. Although I've got to say, it doesn't look like it. Going off GSM Arena, if the OnePlus 6 is at 83.8%, this feels more like a 78. Mind you, that's still amazing considering the price bracket it's in, and whilst on close inspection it's definitely grainy. With a 720p resolution, videos and games look just fine. It's not the brightest and viewing angles fall off quite quickly, but for $140, I'm really happy with it. It is a notch display, but at least Oppo have kind of run with it. They've taken advantage of it, using it as a separator for these commands, which can be brought up when playing full screen video or games. And this is useful stuff, being able to access messages and take instant screen recordings. The phone is powered by Android 8.1 and ColorOS 5.1, and while I'm not a fan of the aesthetic, it does feel developed and fully fledged. You can't deny that there's a lot going on here. You've got things like app cloning, you've got a private safe, you've even got a dedicated kid mode built in to the default launcher. It's annoying that you can't do simple things like holding down on the home screen to change your wallpaper, or being able to dismiss notifications with a single swipe, like you can on stock Android. Full screen gesture controls work nicely though. You get these 3 little bars at the bottom which you drag up to initiate commands, and after a little bit of practice, becomes very intuitive. Now, a lot of you guys are probably wondering what's powering this phone, and bearing in mind it's £110 or $140 price point, it's pretty well specced out. You're getting 3GB of RAM and the Snapdragon 450, which for some perspective is just over half as powerful as the Snapdragon 660, which in itself is just over half as powerful as the 845. The phone lags a little bit when there are multiple workflows or when you're trying to do some work while something else is downloading in the background, but generally speaking, UI usage falls well within its remit. A lot of games will auto full screen, and while the visuals have to be dialed down, pretty much every game is playable and looks decent. To give you an idea, Asphalt 9 plays fine, but at about 25 frames per second on its lowest settings. The speaker is actually pretty good, but when you combine the bittersweet overall performance of the phone with the fact that I regularly ended up covering it playing any game in landscape, it kind of makes me think that gaming has been an afterthought here rather than the priority. Cameras, and you've actually got dual cameras here, which, credit where due, is a blessing at this price. It's a flat module too, so no camera bump, which is nice because it keeps the phone stable when it's on a flat surface. You've got a 13 and a 2 megapixel sensor, and in terms of taking portrait mode shots, that 2 megapixel secondary camera does the job. Edge detection is not bad at all. General images aren't the punchiest, but as long as you keep the HDR mode on, outdoor shots generally come out fairly well exposed. It needs good lighting, but this is easily one of the better $150 phone cameras. It's got digital zoom, but does apply a clever kind of sharpening when you use it to make pictures better than if you just cropped into the original. Obviously, things start to get pretty hairy in low light, but again, even flagship phones are struggling with this, so to expect a phone of this budget to cope would be a bit much. Now, the attention to beauty here is both really impressive and frightening. It identifies if you're a male or female, and gets to work on not just your face, but body and limbs too. Just for fun, I tried dialing it up to maximum beauty mode, and there's a lot of work going on here. In fact, if we zoom into my hand, you can actually see the contrast between the way it treats my skin versus my jeans. It tries to preserve all the detail in fabrics while doing the exact opposite to your skin. There's a lot to play around with as well, both when taking the photos and after. Definitely some fun to be had with the camera. Apart from severe overexposure, the selfie camera is pretty good. Skin looks smooth without seeming artificial, and it's pretty detailed. But yeah, that overexposure can come back to haunt you. In this photo, you pretty much can't tell I'm wearing a t-shirt, and the image is so blown out that it almost looks like my head is floating. Storage isn't the best. You've got 32 gigabytes on the base model, which means that by the time I've installed my basic applications on top of the existing software, I'm about 20 gigabytes in. But you do get microSD card support, so not a deal breaker. The company also talked about their raise to wake feature, which basically uses motion detection to know when you've lifted up your phone and turns the screen on. Honestly though, it's a bit hit or miss. It wasn't reliable enough for me, and I turned it off after a couple of days. Having said that, there is a fingerprint scanner this time, not to be taken for granted from a phone at this price, and a step forward from the Realme 1. It is nice and spacious, but pretty much flush with the body, so you'll sometimes find you'll place your finger a little too much to one side. It is fast though, and I found myself defaulting to this instead of face unlock or using a pattern. Okay, so where does that leave us? Whilst over the last few weeks we've seen a lot of amazing value phones on the channel, it's worth bearing in mind that these have been targeted squarely at flagships. And you've got to remember that the Realme 2 is not targeted at the same consumer. It is a really cheap phone, and in some ways it shows, but the back panel, high screen to body ratio, and considerable battery life give it a real edge over pretty much any phone at this price. Thanks a lot for watching guys, I really hope you enjoyed the video, and if you're new around here, if you could smash that subscribe button down below, that would really mean a lot to me. My name is Aaron, this is Mr. Who's the Boss, and I'll catch you guys next time.